guys, welcome to Punky's World. This is the third edition of Retro Wrestling Recap. This is SummerSlam 1991. Took place on August 26th, 1991, with Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, and Roddy Piper on the call. It started off with the Warlord and Power and Glory versus the Dragon, Kerry Von Erich, and the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. It was a little chaotic, but it was a decent match. Bulldog, Dragon, and Kerry won. Then it was Bret Hart versus Kurt Hennig. Excellent technical match, which you would expect from the two of them. And Bret became the new Intercontinental Champion. Like I said, excellent technical match. Again, you would definitely expect nothing less from them. The next match was the Bushwhackers versus the Natural Disasters, which are Earthquake and Typhoon. Typhoon soon after that became turned babyface and became Tugboat. The Bushwhackers had Andre the Giant with them because the Natural Disasters had attacked Andre. The Natural Disasters won the match. And they tried to attack Andre, but LOD showed up to protect Andre. Ted DiBiase versus Virgil for the $1 Million Championship. And Virgil becomes the $1 Million Champion. Now, I have stated on this channel multiple times my feelings toward Virgil. And that's all I'm going to say. Although I will say it was a halfway decent match. The next match was the Mountie versus the Big Boss Man. Loser spends the night in jail. Oh, that was hilarious. It's actually a really good match. They're both more than capable of a really good match. And the Mountie went to jail. The Big Boss Man won. They had... Well, I'll tell you what. I'll go through the rest of the card, then I'll go through my notes. Because it's several spots where they showed the Mountie, going to jail and going through all the booking process and stuff. And we'll talk about that after we talk about the rest of the card. The LOD versus the Nasty Boys for the Tag Team Championships. The LOD became the new championships, and this was a street fight, by the way. No DQ, no count out, anything goes. Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Mike Rotunda. Rotunda won. Well, he was wrestling as IRS. It wasn't a bad match. I mean, they're both capable of a really good, strong technical match. And it was a good match. But it could have been better. And I'm sure it's not their fault. I'm sure they did what they could, Their match was also placed in a strange place on the card to me. That's the kind of match that should have been earlier in the card. Maybe throw the Intercontinental title match before the main event. I'm just saying, it just felt oddly placed. The next match was the main event. The match made in hell. Because remember, this SummerSlam was taglined, the match made in heaven and the match made in hell. Which was Hogan and Warrior versus Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan, and Colonel Mustafa, with special ref Sid Justice. And Hogan and Warrior won. And the Warrior chased the other two out and Hogan pin Slaughter. Okay, now to my notes. I had the wedding, which was the match made in heaven. Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. Okay. I wrote some notes, and that's one of my favorite things to do. To like give you trivia and information about the wrestlers and stuff that you might not have known. So I try to do that when I do these recaps. So let's just start from the beginning. The Bushwhackers used to be the Sheep Herders. They were a bloody, vicious tag team. And they're a very experienced team. They just changed when they went to the World Wrestling Federation. It was no longer blood and guts and violence and, the Sheep Herders. But these were guys with so many years' experience that I don't think they minded switching it up. You know what I mean? They did a really good job switching it up. For some reason, Bret Hart ended up ripping Curt Hennig's tights off. I don't know why. And the ending of that match was a bit strange. Yes, Bret won with the sharpshooter, except that Hennig was shaking his head no and had not tapped. Something was wrong. I don't know why they did that. At all. It doesn't make sense. Something wasn't right there. And even if when you looked over at Stu right after it happened, he had this look on his face like, what just happened? Even he knew. But then Bret came up and hugged them and stuff, and it was almost like he dropped it, But something wasn't right. And I don't know what it was or what the circumstances were around the whole thing, but something stunk in Denmark there. The LOD, or Legion of Doom, their full name is Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. But they were not allowed to use Road Warriors in the World Wrestling Federation, and I don't remember the whole reason why, but I remember reading it at one point, and that's why they were only LOD. Because I remember looking it up back then and saying, why are they only LOD? They're the Road Warriors. They're Road Warrior Animal and Road Warrior Hawk. What the heck? And it said that they couldn't. Now getting back to the Mountie going to jail, it was actually kind of funny. The Mountie cut his promo in front of the paddy wagon with the police around and told him what to do to the boss man, whatever. And you could see the police actually trying not to laugh in the background. It was so funny. And they were actually laughing when they dragged him out. It was a highly entertaining thing. They showed several clips throughout of the Mountie going to jail and refusing to be fingerprinted and them forcing him to be fingerprinted and tricking him into taking his mugshot. They put him in a cell. And the last thing you see is the man comes up to him. He's giving him a hard time. He's blasted, drunk off his ass. And the guy says, you want to fight me, buddy? And I think he was supposed to think he meant, do you want to fight me, comma, buddy? That's not what he was saying. He was saying, do you want to fight my buddy? He said, this is me buddy. And he turns around and there's this large man in a leather hat, just a real typical outfit of a gay man in the 70s and 80s. And he talked with a very effeminate voice. And he said, don't you just love the feel of leather against your skin? Dude was gay. Or playing a gay individual anyway. and the other guy was playing a drunk individual. I'm sure these were people planted in there to make it look as terrible as possible. But it was absolutely hilarious. Oh, I have more. I wanted to talk to you about General Adnan. General Adnan is actually Adnan al-Kaisi. He is actually from Iraq. However, he was naturalized after marrying an American woman back in 1967. He actually brought wrestling to Baghdad, and of course, Saddam Hussein had been the president forever over there. And he attended high school with and was friends with Saddam Hussein in high school. Don't get your feathers in a tizzy here. Like I said, he's a naturalized American citizen. But back in the day, he brought wrestling to Baghdad with the help of his, high school classmate Saddam Hussein, who was the president by then, and at Saddam's behest. They said, okay, if you're bringing it here and he's going to be wrestling, he needs to win. He won every single match he had, including against Andre the Giant. If you're older, you might remember him tagging with Jay Strongbow as Billy White Wolf. And they were the WWF Tag Team Champions. He was actually the first Iraqi or Arab to wrestle for the WWF/WWE. At first I was like, wait a minute, how could he be the first Arab? The Iron Sheik is Arab. But I thought about it, and he was there long before the Iron Sheik was. He just wasn't there under his name. Though he was the first. Throughout, Bobby Heenan kept calling Ric Flair the real world champion. Now, at this time, Ric Flair had come in, not long before, with the 10 pounds of gold. The world title that he had held at the end, and he had held for years. They switched it to that title from the NWA World Championship that you saw in TNA later on. That wasn't the title that he had with him. And there was a legal dispute over that belt. So eventually, WWE had to blur any time that belt was shown. And that was really stupid because later on, the NWA gave Ric Flair that belt. He had thought that that was his belt anyway because he paid them so much money. So he thought he had bought the belt. They disagreed. It was just a legal mess. But years later, they gave it to him, and he now does own it. So, and of course, Colonel Mustafa is the Iron Sheik. So it was an interesting team because you have the Iron Sheik from Iran who speaks Farsi and his unique brand of Farslish. You know how they say Spanglish? Well, for him, it's Farslish because he speaks sort of a mixed Farsi English, which is usually very tough to understand. Then you have Adnan al-Kaisi, who speaks Arabic, which he probably speaks actually very good English, I'm going to say, because he's been married to an American woman since at least 1967 and has been a naturalized citizen since then. So I would imagine his English is pretty darn good by now. I mean, he's been married for over 50 years to an American woman. Um, so, and of course, Slaughter, who is American. Um, and a little further into that, when Sergeant Slobber, I can't believe I just said that. That was a mistake. Honest to goodness, that was a mistake. Oh my god. Oh no. Can't believe I said that. Oh no. Let's try that again. When Sergeant Slaughter, real name Robert Remus, oh my gosh, became a heel and did the whole Iraqi sympathizer thing, he got so many threats, and his home had to be just, him and his wife had to have crazy security. He was in fear for her whenever he wasn't there. It was insane. For those who don't know, Sergeant Slaughter was one of the first wrestlers to, well, he was the first wrestler to cross over to a kid show, to really have popularity outside of the ring. That being said, there were wrestlers much older than him that made movies way back in the black and white days and stuff, but he was the first one to really have commercial popularity outside the ring because he became part of G.I. Joe in the 80s, way before he went to the World Wrestling Federation. This is when he was still with the AWA. And Sergeant Slaughter was actually a former Marine. He was best known before the World Wrestling Federation for his feud with Colonel De Beers, who I guess was supposed to be some kind of SS colonel or something. The character, I mean. So yeah. Why do I have Hogan's theme song going through my frickin' head? I can't stand Hogan. And I can stand Warrior even less if that's possible. The funny thing is, Warrior became so popular. But at the time, see, I liked Hogan when I was a little kid. You know? Around the time he won the title, I was at the right age to be a stupid brainwashed Hulkamaniac. But by the time the Warrior came around, I was a teenager and I was over it, you know? So the last thing I wanted to deal with was another Hulk Hogan where he would no sell and Hulk up. And yeah, it's so predictable. It's so terrible. Doesn't know wrist lock from a wrist watch. Doesn't know his rear side from his elbow. And as far as wrestling is concerned, and yeah, no. I like wrestlers who can actually wrestle. So, yeah. At any rate, those are my opinions and my opinions alone. They do not reflect anyone else's opinions. But yeah, I feel that way. I just do. Excuse me. Sorry. So basically Hogan and Sid Justice did the pose down at the end. I did want to note that they did, Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's wedding, but they completely cut off the reception over on Peacock. They completely cut off the reception. Come to think of it, the reception might have been a Coliseum Video exclusive. Except that I thought, when I watched the pay-per-view, that SummerSlam ran over their allotted pay-per-view time, but they let it go. I mean, because it is the World Wrestling Federation, and they were paying them, a fortune to air it. Because of the reception. Because they actually have had times where they've run over and the cable companies have cut them off. But this particular night, they didn't cut them off. So, kind of sucks that they cut that off. But I do know what happened. Jake Roberts brought the snake into the middle of the reception. Elizabeth is screaming. I think Macho Man is chasing him, and the whole place is screaming, and dishes are flying, and tables are flying as people are trying to get away from the snake. And I think The Undertaker was with him when he crashed the party. So, yeah. And they were alluding to the fact that the snake bit the Ultimate Warrior. I'm trying to remember that. I remember the snake biting Randy Savage. Which by then was a devenomized cobra. Which they acted like it wasn't. And trying to think. Yeah, I remember that. Randy Savage was tied up in the ropes. It was biting him. My mother was kind of ticked off that they did that. Roddy Piper runs down from commentary and tries to save him, but Roddy don't like snakes. Roddy don't like snakes in real life. And so, doesn't like snakes, I should say. Doesn't like snakes in real life, let alone. At any rate. So, that's what he did. So that was either right after or right before that. I'm not sure. And they did the whole thing with the venom and stuff. And my mother was very upset. She knew it wasn't real. That wasn't the point. That it would have to be devenomized. She was upset because she was looking at little children crying because they didn't understand. She was like, this is going too far, And so, yeah. It definitely was, but I have an idea for today. Anyway, guys, I will get this in editing so you can enjoy it, and I hope you do, because it was as good a card as I remember. Thank you so much for joining me. Please click like and subscribe. God bless you. Bye-bye.